Back to the early testing days of Lockheed Martin's infamous SR-71 spy plane, quoted as the Black Bird due to its distinct color coding. Before the production of these behemoth of an aircraft was initiated, experiments had to be done to ensure the safety of the aircraft and also to test the capabilities of the aircraft and compare the data gathered to what was initially conceptualized by the aeronautical engineers. Immensely experienced pilots were handpicked by the company to be given the role test pilot and test and handle the previously strange and new aircraft. Crashes were not that seldom in the testing phases, since they were still testing the aircraft and was still not approved for production. One of these not that seldom crashes was the flight of test pilot Bill Weaver and his navigator/flight test reconnaissance and navigation system specialist Jim Zwayer of the SR-71 Blackbird, tail number 952, on the 25th of January, 1966. All went well in the first phases of the test flight. The crew followed the usual test patterns, from refueling from a KC-135 tanker to replenish the lost fuel during takeoff, and then accelerating to Mach 3.2 and increasing altitude for cruising.
Detaching fuel lines in 3, 2, 1. Fuel lines detached. Roger that. Tail number 952 to base, we're going to increase our speed and altitude to cruising. Roger that, tail number 952. Yo buddy, I'm going to increase our speed to Mach 3.2 and our altitude to 17,000 feet. Better hold on tight there. Wind stable, right? No problem with that, Mr. Pilot.
First of the cruise went quite well, but as the pilot took the plane into a scheduled 35-degree bank turn to the right engine suffered an inlet unstart. The right engine's automatic inlet control system suddenly failed, requiring to switch to manual control. An inlet unstart was one of the complex problems then aeronautical engineers tried to solve over the testing runs of the aircraft. The aircraft's two J-58 Pratt & Whitney axial flow turbojet engines were at its most efficient at Mach 3.2. But to maintain the consistent airflow to the compressor, the supersonic air flowing through the inlet must be slowed down to subsonic speeds. This was achieved by moving a cone called a spike inside each inlet. But as the airflow reduces, it causes a disturbance, a shock wave called normal shock. An analog computer within the engine would control a complex systems of bleed tubes and bypass doors to handle the pressure. However, the early analog computers would often have difficulty keeping up with the rapidly changing flight conditions. If the pressure inside the engine became too much, it could blow back off the front of the engine, disrupting the airflow from coming in the inlet. This phenomena was given the name Inlet Unstart. The unstart can cause immense drag because of the forward blowback and would often extinguish the afterburners, causing asymmetrical thrust and violent yawing. Inputs from the autopilot system and the pilot could counter this yawing, recapturing the shockwave and return the plane to normal operation. The resulting asymmetric thrust caused by the SR-71 tail number 952 to roll further right, increasing the bank to 60 degrees and pitch up at the same time. The pilot jammed the control stick as far left and forward as it would go to recover from the violent rolling and pitching further right and up. But it seemed to have no effect. The pilot knowing the chances of ejection from 78,800 feet at Mach 3.8 would be pretty slim. The pilot hoped to be able to get the plane to a lower altitude and lower the speed to subsonic speeds to allow a safe ejection. The pilot yelled to Zweyer about what was happening and told him to stay with the plane as the pilot attempted to gain control. But the G-forces built up so rapidly that the pilot's words came out garbled and unintelligible, as confirmed later by the cockpit voice recorder. The radical G-forces were beyond to what a human being can take, and the pilot and his crewmate succumbed to unconsciousness, neither able to activate the ejection system. The airframe initially broke apart after the cockpit, with its unconscious crew, SR-71 tail number 952, disintegrated in mid-air. The two pilots were thrown away as the aircraft was torn into pieces by supersonic speeds. The crew back at Edwards noticed that their plane went missing from radar and lost radio contact with the crew. The crew assumed that the flight crew could have not survived such a violent breakup at that speed and altitude. But Bill Weaver had been free-falling from the very edge of space. Weaver doesn't know if his parachute is still attached until it springs open. Now his thoughts to his crewmate, Jim Zweyer.
Jim Zweyer's parachute looked like it was about a quarter mile away. That was really a relief. I didn't think either one of us was going to survive, but to think that both of us had was tremendous relief.
Weaver lands in New Mexico, 800 miles from the base. He could see the burning wreckage of the nose section of the aircraft, which had broken off aft of the rear cockpit and crashed about 10 miles from the main wreckage. Other parts were scattered over an area approximately 15 miles long and 10 miles wide. On the ground, he learns the sad news. His friend, Jim, had not survived. His neck broke the moment his helmet came in contact with a Mach 3 slipstream.
Find out that he had died. It was really devastating. He was a wonderful guy. I believe he was one of the best.
A local cowboy who owned a cattle ranch rescued him and brought him to a nearby hospital. The cowboy was the first one to also discover what happened to the pilot's crewmate. The pilot was airlifted to the nearest hospital, where he made contact with Edwards Air Base. He was extracted the day after the hospital treated him. An investigation found that optimizing the plane's performance had made it less stable. That led to a loss of control, which put the airframe under catastrophic strain. 2 weeks after the crash, he went back again flying the aircraft and conduction trial runs. Lockheed decided to discontinue any testing of the SR-71 that put the CG further aft than the given specs, and they solved some other problems through aerodynamic means, including the trim drag reduction and the improvement of the aircraft's high Mach cruise performance. Also, the company introduced a digital computer that controlled the air intakes, replaced the old analog ones that were prevalent on those early experimental aircraft. The intake unstarts became much more rare.